Okay, so welcome to the deep dive. Today we're really diving into something that I think is on a lot of people's minds these days, and that is job security.
It's a big one. Yeah.
Yeah. And we're going to be looking at it, from kind of a historical perspective. What did it mean to have a secure job before, AI really hit the scene?
Right.
And then, compare that to today, obviously, where AI is, really changing the way we work.
It is. It's a huge impact.
And so we're going to be using this this other podcast that we found called Job Security Before AI versus After AI as our guide.
Great source.
And our goal, really, is to pull out the most important takeaways for you.
Yeah, the key insights, the things that you really need to know to make sense of all this and to navigate this job market that's constantly evolving.
Exactly. So to kind of kick things off, let's just think about, what did the world of work even look like before AI was, such a big deal?
Okay, so imagine this. Before AI was a major player, human labor was essentially the driving force behind pretty much every single industry you could think of. Everything, yeah. So, customer service, for example, that was people talking to people.
Right.
Data entry was a whole bunch of people sitting there inputting information manually, Manufacturing, you had these big assembly lines, and even creative work, all of that was solely in the realm of, human minds.
Right. No robots writing poetry.
Not yet.
Okay, so it was a completely different landscape, in terms of how work was done. And from what I've, read in this other podcast, it sounds like, the skills you had back then, they lasted a lot longer.
Yeah.
Like if you learned something, you were good for a while.
Yeah, absolutely. Your skills had a much longer shelf life, so to speak. If you developed expertise in a specific field, that knowledge was likely to be relevant, for years and years. There was a real sense of stability in your professional capabilities.
Right. You weren't constantly having to learn new things.
Not to the same extent as we do now.
Right. Okay. So what did the typical career path look like back then?
Well, it was much more linear. You would finish your education, you'd get a job, often with a large, stable company.
Okay.
And then you would generally expect to stay in that job, potentially even with that same company, for a really long time, with gradual promotions and advancements leading all the way to retirement.
Wow. So even within the same company?
Often, yeah. Lifelong careers within a single company were a reality for many.
So completely different from today's gig economy.
Absolutely.
Okay. And one of the things that really stands out to me, when we think about that time before AI, is that businesses really relied on human intelligence for all the big important decisions.
Totally. It's fascinating to think about it now, but yes, strategic planning, coming up with new ideas, understanding customer needs, all of that was entirely dependent on human minds.
Right. All in our heads. Okay.
Yeah.
So that gives us a pretty good picture of, the pre-AI world of work.
Yeah.
But even without AI, it wasn't perfect, right?
Right. It wasn't all rosy. I mean, think about it. Without widespread automation, things were just inherently slower. Processes were much more manual, which meant more time and often more inefficiencies.
Yeah, like all that paperwork.
Oh, mounds of paperwork. Everything was handled manually, which, obviously slowed down productivity and just ate up so much time.
Yeah, and I can imagine that, having to do all that repetitive work, all that paperwork, it probably didn't make people very happy.
No, not at all. It could be incredibly tedious and demotivating for employees. And from a business perspective, it definitely limited growth potential. Companies couldn't scale their operations as quickly, which meant fewer new job opportunities.
Right. Okay, so we've kind of, painted a picture of what it was like back then. Let's really dig into the advantages, the real upsides of job security in the pre-AI era.
Okay, well, one of the biggest advantages, as we mentioned earlier, was that long-term stability. People could reasonably expect to stay in their chosen profession for decades without the constant worry about their job becoming obsolete.
Right, they knew what their future looked like.
Yeah, there was a predictability to it. You could plan your life, you could buy a house, start a family, knowing that your job was likely to be there for you.
That must have been a great feeling.
I think so. And, career paths were generally much clearer. There was often a very well-defined way to move up within a company.
So, you knew what the next step was.
Exactly.
Right.
If you put in the work, gained experience, you could usually see where you were headed.
And the podcast we're looking at, it mentions valued human skills, as a real advantage of that time. What were those skills?
So back then, things like experience, loyalty to a company, and a deep, often unspoken knowledge of a particular industry or role were incredibly valuable.
Right, things that you couldn't just download.
Exactly. They took time and dedication to develop. And perhaps one of the biggest differences compared to today is that people generally weren't worried about robots taking their jobs.
Right, AI wasn't even on the radar.
Not really. I mean, there were always advancements in technology, but the idea of AI causing widespread job displacement just wasn't a major concern.
So stability, predictability, and a sense that your skills were valuable. Those seem to be the key takeaways in terms of the upsides of job security before AI.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
But as we've discussed, there were definitely downsides as well. So let's talk about the disadvantages, the challenges that came with job security in that pre-AI world.
Well, as we mentioned before, one of the big ones was the potential for slower progress. Without AI and automation, businesses just couldn't scale up as quickly. Everything was more labor-intensive, which meant slower growth and potentially fewer new opportunities.
Right, and all that manual work, it must have been pretty soul-crushing for a lot of people.
Oh, yeah. I mean, think about those factory workers on assembly lines doing the same repetitive tasks for hours on end, or the data entry clerks constantly inputting numbers. It was tedious, it could lead to burnout, and it definitely impacted productivity.
Yeah. Not very inspiring. And if businesses were expanding slowly, that meant there were fewer jobs to go around.
Exactly. The job market could be quite competitive, especially for new graduates or people trying to switch careers. And let's not forget about the costs for businesses. Having a large human workforce is expensive.
Right. Salaries, benefits, all of that.
Yeah, it all adds up. And in some industries like mining or construction, there were also serious safety concerns.
Right, because those jobs were often dangerous.
Very much so. So even though there was job security in the sense that people had jobs, their physical safety was often at risk.
It's kind of a complex picture, right?
It is. It's not a simple black and white situation.
Okay, so we've looked at the pre-AI world. Now let's shift gears and talk about how AI has changed everything. How has AI really impacted the workplace and the idea of job security?
Well, the impact has been significant, that's for sure. One of the most obvious changes is the automation of routine tasks across a whole range of industries. Things like data entry, customer service, scheduling those are now often done by AI.
And that's obviously saved businesses a lot of time and money.
Oh, absolutely. AI can work much faster and more accurately than humans, and it doesn't need breaks or vacations. So that's a huge advantage for companies looking to improve their bottom line.
But it's not just about AI taking over existing jobs. It's also created entirely new jobs, right?
Right. The rise of AI has led to a whole new set of careers in fields like data science, AI ethics, machine learning, and all sorts of other areas that just didn't exist before.
So it's kind of a double-edged sword. Some jobs are lost, but new ones are created.
Exactly. It's a complex and ever-changing landscape.
Okay, so what about the people whose jobs haven't been completely replaced by AI? How has their work changed?
Well, in many cases, AI has allowed people to focus on more complex and interesting tasks. They're not bogged down with the routine stuff anymore, so they can be more creative and productive.
So that's potentially a good thing.
It can be, yeah. It frees up people to do what humans do best: think critically, solve problems, come up with new ideas.
Okay, so there are definitely potential benefits. But let's be honest, the big concern with AI is job losses.
Absolutely. There's no denying that AI has already led to job displacement in certain industries, and that trend is likely to continue.
So which sectors have been hit the hardest so far?
Well, manufacturing is a big one. Robots are now doing a lot of the work that humans used to do.
Right.
Retail is another area where we're seeing significant job losses as more and more people shop online and self-checkout systems become more common.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And customer service is also being impacted, with chatbots and other AI-powered systems taking over some of the basic tasks.
So those are some pretty big industries.
They are, and it's important to remember that this is an ongoing process. As AI continues to develop, it's likely to affect even more jobs in the future.
Okay, so that's the kind of scary part. But let's try to be optimistic for a minute and focus on the potential upsides of job security in this new AI-driven world. What are some of the good things that might come out of this?
Well, one of the most exciting things is the sheer number of new jobs that are being created in tech fields. We're talking about massive demand for people with skills in AI development, cybersecurity, data science, and all sorts of other areas.
So for people who are interested in technology, this is a good time to be alive.
It really is. There are so many opportunities out there.
Okay. And we've talked about efficiency, but how could that contribute to job security for people in general.
Well, think about it this way. When businesses are more efficient, they can potentially grow faster, which could lead to more jobs overall.
Right. So it's not just about cutting costs, it's about expanding the economy.
Exactly. And, another potential benefit is that AI could free up people to do more fulfilling work.
Right. Less drudgery, more creativity.
Exactly. If AI can take care of the boring, repetitive tasks, then people can focus on things that require human ingenuity and problem-solving skills.
So maybe work will become more enjoyable.
It's certainly a possibility.
Okay, and then there are the advances that AI is driving in fields like healthcare, finance, and education.
Right. Those are really exciting developments. We're seeing AI being used to improve diagnoses, personalize learning experiences, and even manage financial risk.
So lots of potential for positive change.
Absolutely. But of course, it's important to acknowledge the challenges too.
Right, and the biggest one, as we've discussed, is job displacement.
Yeah, that's the elephant in the room. As AI gets better and better at doing things that humans used to do, there's a real risk that people will lose their jobs.
And that creates a lot of uncertainty and anxiety for people.
Of course. It's hard to plan for the future when you're not sure what the job market will look like in 5 or 10 years.
Right.
And then there's the issue of skills gaps.
Right. What does that mean exactly?
It means that a lot of people don't have the skills they need to work in the new AI-driven economy.
So they're kind of left behind.
In a way, yeah. And then there are the broader societal concerns, like privacy issues.
Right. People are worried about how AI is collecting and using their data.
Yeah, that's a legitimate concern. And it could lead to regulations that affect how AI is developed and used, which could indirectly impact jobs.
Okay, so it's a pretty complicated picture. What can people do to protect themselves, to make themselves more secure in this new world?
Well, the most important thing is to upskill, to learn new things, especially in areas related to technology and AI.
Right. So don't just sit back and wait for the robot overlords to take over.
Exactly. Take charge of your own future. And be adaptable. The world is changing quickly, so you need to be willing to learn and grow throughout your career.
So lifelong learning is key.
Absolutely. And remember that there are still things that humans do better than AI.
Yeah.
Things like creativity, critical thinking, and emotional intelligence.
Right, those are the things that robots can't replicate.
Not yet, anyway. So focus on developing those skills, and finally diversify your skills.
What?
Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Learn a range of things so that you're more versatile and adaptable.
Okay, so those are some great tips. I think we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have. It's been a really interesting discussion.
So just to wrap things up, it seems like both the pre-AI and the post-AI eras have their own pros and cons when it comes to job security.
Yeah, that's a fair assessment. In the pre-AI world, there was more stability, but there were also limitations in terms of progress and opportunity.
Right. And in the AI era, there are amazing new possibilities,
Yeah.
but there's also a lot of uncertainty and a need to constantly adapt.
Exactly.
And the key takeaway for our listeners is that AI is here to stay. It's already changing the world, and it's only going to become more important in the future.
That's right.
So the best thing you can do is embrace it, learn about it, and figure out how to make it work for you.
Absolutely. Don't be afraid of it. See it as an opportunity to grow and evolve.
And on that note, we'd like to leave you with a final thought. As we move further into this age of artificial intelligence, what do you envision as the ideal balance between technological advancement and the irreplaceable human element in the future of work? What role do you see yourself playing in that future? And what steps can you take today to prepare for it?
We'd love to hear your thoughts.
Thanks for joining us.
See you next time.